covering the WNBA this past season, Caitlin Clark's rookie year, for all of the conversation that surrounded her, some which was fair and some which wasn't, the one thing that I cannot deny is the amount of little girls that were showing up to follow her, little girls with their parents.
Global media. Caddy K, a heavyweight, recently released a WNBA bombshell from the reputable BBC. Caitlin Clark was publicly preferred by journalists over Angel Reese in her most recent shockwaves from the interview. Basketball for women. While talking about the rapid expansion of the women's sport, K had to draw attention to Clark's impact that is transformational while rejecting Reese's contributions.
I was just about to say same thing for Angel Reese when I had a chance to cover their games, but I think Caitlin represented, and again, some of this to me probably is not fair to her because it was not anything that she said or was truly based on her personality, but she was a white girl from the middle of America. And so she represented a whole lot to a lot of people, whether that is truly what she prescribed to or not. We can all.
This surprising conclusion from a major international news image illustrates how Clark's impact has went beyond American media and was able to. K's remarks received widespread notice, shown the widening gap that's transforming women's basketball indefinitely.
The WNBA has been around for a while. The Women's Championship has been around for a long time. You've covered the sport. You played for Georgetown. How do you account for what happened last year when suddenly as many Americans were watching the women's college basketball as they were watching the men's?
Honestly, Caddy, I would venture to say that more folks were watching the women's tournament than the men's, ultimately. It's a culmination of a lot of things as I reflect on my experience as a women's basketball player and now as a member of the media.
In a recent interview, talking about the rapid expansion of K's remarks about women's basketball showed a definite predilection for Caitlin, the effect and style of Clark while basically disregarding Angel Reese's contributions to the growth of the sport. Popularity. This wasn't a casual situation. Commentary. This was an experienced international. A journalist delivering a conclusive statement about what she thinks is very motivating. The revolution in women's basketball.
Now, I will add the additional layer, and some folks may want to argue about this, but based on my lived experience in this country, the Larry Bird Magic Johnson effect of it all, that is to speak of the two representations of two different worlds when you talk about Iowa and LSU, it's a culminating ingredient in how we get to this big time moment that crosses into mainstream sports conversation.
Let's begin by looking at precisely what transpired during this interview. Monica McNutt and Kay were having a conversation. Former basketball player for Georgetown and present-day expert regarding the outstanding increase in women's college viewership. Basketball.
I interviewed Magic Johnson not long after, in about early last summer, and I asked him about the phenomenon of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and had they really changed the game for good? Had they changed the whole business model?
Main attraction is the athlete whose talent and marketability had genuinely changed the K's remarks during the women's game also moved on an important element that many analysts have been hesitant to speak candidly about: the attractiveness of various demographics. Players, without stating it directly, K agreed that a portion of Clark's "she is really popular," the capacity to draw in crowds that hadn't previously kept up with women's basketball. She was talking about the Larry Bird magic. The Johnson effect creates a convincing picture of how that fabled rivalry united disparate fan bases and increased the NBA's appeal. The analysis of a BBC journalist went beyond merely comparing players. She showed sincere interest in if women's basketball could keep up this pace without depending on particular persons. This inquiry demonstrates something significant about how global observers assess the current. The WNBA landscape is regarded as quite reliant on Clark's celebrity rather than as opposed to a more extensive structural shift in how women's athletics are viewed. As McNutt's a tactful reaction to K's framing, yet revealing while recognizing Clark's enormous influence, she meticulously attempted to return the discussion to many stars such as Reese. She explained how both athletes were now well known and made reference to the two examples of two distinct universes when conversing. Regarding LSU and Iowa, this cautious, Kay's more delicate balancing act was in contrast to emphasis on Clark directly. What makes this interaction is so important that it reveals the fundamental conflicts in how various fans and media personalities recognize the dynamic Kay of Clark Reese, free from the constraints of politics, factors that frequently affect the American sports press, was at liberty to convey what numerous observers silently think that Clark's influence on developing the game has been unique and transforming in a manner that surpasses any contributions from other participants. The undertone of Kay's remarks also discusses marketability when talking about the economic feasibility of women's. Kay explicitly emphasized basketball, Clark's attractiveness to companies and advertisers. She observed that Clark has become into a marketing giant with significant businesses keen to collaborate with her.
Picture this marketing appeal is a
essential component of long-term growth. Kay can plainly see Clark in any sport as the player with the greatest amount of close the distance between athletic superiority and widespread marketability. Possibly the most eye-opening moment occurred. Kay tackled the racial issue head-on. Considering the cultural factors influencing women's basketball, she admitted that Clark was a Caucasian girl from the center of America, which meant a great deal to many people. This candid evaluation of the demographic elements that impact the popularity of players is something that many American pundits have been unwilling to publicly address. Kay's readiness to accept these dynamics that are extreme or unapologetic qualification illustrates the importance of, from a global standpoint, she was able to express what many onlookers comprehend, but few people explicitly state that a portion of Clark's enormous appeal comes from, based on her capacity to appeal to groups that haven't historically kept a careful eye on women's basketball. But it would be incorrect to consider Kay's remarks to be contemptuous of Reese's abilities or significance. Instead, her analysis was centered on the market, influence, and marketability as opposed to just her basketball skills were being offered. An objective evaluation of who she feels has had the biggest influence on increasing the number of people who watch women's. To her credit, basketball player McNutt attempted to keep a more impartial viewpoint, bringing Reese back frequently into the dialogue and highlighting the fact that both players hold each other in the highest regard. Kay's queries and remarks, nevertheless, continuously guided the conversation back to Clark's unique impact, which exposed her. Believe Clark has been the main driving force for the sport's recent popularity explosion. What makes Kay's viewpoint that is especially beneficial is that it originates from somewhere outside the echo American sports media chamber. She's not involved in the current discussions and political factors that frequently influence how American pundits talk about the dynamic of Clark Reese's outsider status enabled her to convey what many observers think but occasionally are unwilling to say outright, that Clark has emerged as the spokesperson for women's basketball around the world in a manner that surpasses all other players at the moment. Kay's remarks' timing is also important given Clark's WNBA debut the next season and the anticipations for her first professional appearance reaching passion pitch. Kay's support for Clark's transformational effect increases the growing proof that her celebrity power goes beyond conventional international media audiences for basketball. Kay and other figures rarely comment on the WNBA issues unless they believe there is a cultural change that goes beyond athletics. Kay also discussed yet another important element of Clark's attractiveness and her capacity to draw casual admirers who might not otherwise watch women's basketball. She said, the NCAA's enormous ratings from the previous year tournament indicated that, as many, the women's event was being watched by Americans. They were watching college basketball, the men's, and gave this direct credit. Change to Clark's attractiveness, this intersection. For any person, potential is the ultimate goal. Sport trying to reach a wider audience. Talk also disclosed K's knowledge of how personality-driven sports marketing has evolved into, particularly inquired as to whether the expansion of basketball may be sustained if rely on one or two individuals. The inquiry goes right to the core of the current discussion over the future of the WNBA. Does the current spike in popularity mean that change in the way women's sports are structured, are viewed, or is it mainly motivated by using Clark's distinct appeal? McNutt tried to expand the discussion to include other up-and-coming celebrities, such as Gucci Watkins and K's inquiries, but Paige Buckers kept going back to Clark's. One effect this steadfast attention disclosed K's conclusion that although numerous athletes make contributions to the sport, growth Clark is unique in her capacity to garner public interest and alter the assumptions of the business world. K's viewpoint also mentioned the obstacles that female athletes must overcome. Becoming well-known public figures, she said, that women encounter numerous obstacles when attempting to manage public recognition and examination, recognizing the additional difficulties borne by female athletes in comparison to their counterparts who are men. But even in her structuring of this conversation suggested, because Clark has demonstrated exceptional skill at handling these difficulties and keeping her appeal in spite of the close examination, the interview also disclosed information regarding how international observers believe the occasionally heated discussion over K from American media, and Clark and Ree seems perplexed by the sporadic animosity in this discussion, pointing that both athletes possess exceptional talent and have played a part in the sport's development. Her external viewpoint